Hi dear students, in the last presentation we were discussing about environmental impact assessment, and finally we have discussed what are the various processes involved in environmental impact assessment, and we have shown it in a particular block diagram. Now in this presentation we will be explaining what are the different processes involved in environmental impact assessment in detail. As we can see from the figure, the first process involved is proposal identification. So discussing about proposal identifications, decisions made decisions made in this stage are the location of the development. We will be making decisions on the following points, that is the location of the development, the land uses the development will cater for. So how the land used for this particular development will affect the pupil, and the scale, layout and design of the development. All these 3 points are discussed in detail in this stage. So during the proposal identification, these 3 points are mainly considered. Along with these 3 points, cost effectiveness, feasibility and environmental acceptance of the proposal are studied in this stage. So initially, by proposal identification means mainly the authority is concentrating on the cost effectiveness, how much the cost effective it will be, and by introducing such a project or product in a particular area, how it will adversely affect the environment and common people in that area. So during the proposal identification we are concentrating on these areas, that is cost effectiveness, feasibility and environmental acceptance of proposal are studied in this stage. Advantages and disadvantages of the alternative plans are also investigated if needed. See, if any difficulty is identified directly, then we will think about the alternative plans also. So different plans is being proposed during this proposal identification, and the best one out of this one is selected. That is what is happening in the proposal identification. So it is just identification of the proposal. Now comes the screening. Screening means the importance of screening is we have to identify whether EIA is environmental impact assessment is required or not in this stage. So the authority will carefully study about the proposal submitted by the concerned uh, industries and all. So they will directly do the initial screening. In this stage they will decide whether the environmental impact assessment process is required or not. So based on this screening they will be categorizing activity into a risk category, like very low risk category. If it is coming under very low risk category, then environmental impact assessment process ends. There is no requirement to do the environmental impact assessment procedures. Directly the permission will be granted. If it is coming under moderate or unknown risk or high risk, if it is moderate or unknown risk, do preliminary assessment. Only preliminary assessment is required. There is no need to conduct the and complete environmental impact assessment procedures. If it is coming under very high risk, do the full environmental impact assessment study. So that initial screening is being done in this stage. The main objective of screening is classification of the project according to its likely environmental sensitivity. This will determine whether environmental impact assessment is needed, and if so, to what extent. That is what is done in this stage. So for doing screening, of course there will be some guidelines and all. That guidelines is based on the particular country, so it will be different from country to country as well as organization to legislation to legislation. So guidelines for whether or not an EIA is required will be country specific, and legislation often specifies the criteria for screening. So every country will have defined the criteria for screening. See, in India, the Ministry of Environment and Forest will be deciding these criteria and all. Based on that, they will be screening whether it is coming under low risk area, high risk or moderate risk. Okay. So the output of this process is often a document called an initial environmental examination or evaluation. That output of this process, final report of this process is called initial environmental examination or evaluation. So this is being made available to the common people for further reference. So after screening, the report is made available, and the discussions will be carried out on this, based on this discussion in the next step. Okay. So the next process is scoping. Scoping is the process of determining which are the most critical issues to study. It involves local community participation, and hence it it perhaps the most important step in environmental impact assessment. See, in this stage, that is in the third stage only, the participation of the common people is coming for the first time. That is in this scoping stage. Scoping is the process of determining which are the most critical issues to study. So in this process, the most important issues that may have that will caused by this particular product or particular process will be discussed. See, for example, if a what we can say, uh, if a nuclear power plant is being established in a densely populated area, definitely the most important things to be studied is about the radiation effects and all. Like that, if any project is implemented in a particular area, there can be important issues that may rise due to this implementation of this particular project in that area. That will be discussed in the scoping stage. In scoping, detailed prediction work is only carried out for important issues. See, detailed prediction work is only carried out for the important issues or major issues that may rise due to this particular project. If key issues are identified and a full-scale environmental impact assessment considered necessary, then the scoping should include terms of reference for these further studies. The scoping identifies the content and extent of the information to be elaborated and supplied by the developer to the competent authority. So it clearly identifies the content and extent of the information to be elaborated by the developer to the competent authority. So developers will have to specifically give details about what are the points to be mentioned in scoping. So they have to give complete details about these important issues to the competent authorities. Then they will have a discussion with the common people also about these issues and all. If anything is to be addressed, they will clearly address it, and they will consider even the concerns of the common people also. At this stage, the option exists for cancelling or drastically reversing the project. That's why it is called scoping. The name comes scoping is due to this one. See, at this stage, if authority identifies it will have a serious effect on the environment, then there is even a possibility to cancel that particular project, cancel the sanction of that particular project. Before implementing, we are doing all these things. So at this stage, option X for cancelling or drastically revising the project if any major environmental problems be identified. So if any major environmental problems are identified, then the project may be cancelled, or they will suppose for drastically revising the project. Once this stage has passed, the opportunity for major changes to the project is restricted. See, whatever major issues to the environment are there, everything is discussed during the scoping stage itself. Once this stage is overcome, or once this stage is passed, that means the major obstacle is cleared. So everything possible environmental effect has very possible environment effect has to be discussed at this stage, and active common people participation also is to be assured during this stage. Once this stage is cleared, then it is very easy to implement the project. Okay, now next important process is impact analysis. So after scoping, the companies will move on to the next stage, that is impact analysis. Impact analysis involves characterizing the impact in terms of its likely nature, how frequently it is occurring, spatial and temporal distribution, duration and frequency, reversibility and magnitude. All these things are discussed uh, in this stage. And finally, a judgment must be made as to whether the impact is likely to be significant or not. So finally, by doing impact analysis, the authority will identify whether the impact by this particular project is significant or not. If it is not much significant, then definitely they will get the permission. Otherwise, if it is significant, they will have to take the remedial measures. Impact analysis techniques can be quantitative or qualitative. For doing impact analysis, various techniques are available. That itself is a large topic, so we cannot discuss everything here. So it can be either quantitative technique or qualitative technique. The nature of the environmental media being assessed will determine the most appropriate impact analysis techniques. So nature of the environmental media being assessed will determine which one to choose, whether to go for the quantitative analysis or for qualitative analysis. Anyway, just by doing the impact analysis, what does it mean is whether it have an slightly impact or major impact on the environment. If it is having very light impact on the environment, then mostly permission will be granted. Otherwise, they will have to do the remedial measures. Okay, the next stage is mitigation. So in this step, if any important or drastic environmental impact activities are identified by the earlier step, that is impact analysis, then mitigation measures are to be identified and is included during this step. Mitigation means some alternative option to reduce the effect. Okay, എന്താ പറയുക, മോശമായിട്ട് എൻവയോൺമെൻറ്റിൽ സംഭവിക്കാൻ പോകുന്നതിനെ കുറക്കുന്നതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് വാട്ട് ഈസ് ദ വേർഡ് മീനിങ് ഓഫ് മിറ്റിഗേഷൻ. So in all environmental impact processes, effective mitigation measures must be identified and included. The purpose is to avoid or minimize or reduce the adverse effects of all potentially significant impacts. Mitigation measures can be incorporated into the design of the development even if required. Mitigation measures design itself is to be changed, or mitigation measures can be incorporated into the design of the development. An important outcome of this stage will be recommendations for the mitigation measures. So this is the important recommendation for the mitigation. So by the end of this stage we will have some recommendation for the mitigation measures. This would be contained in the environmental impact statement. So clearly this will be mentioned in the environmental impact statement. Clearly the aim will be to introduce measures which minimize any identified adverse impacts and enhance the positive impacts. That is the main aim of doing mitigation. So next one is environmental statement. Once the mitigation everything is completed, then the next process is environmental statement. The environmental statement should objectively document the environmental impact assessment process and findings, giving the equal prominence to positive and negative impacts relative to their importance. So everything will be discussed in this environmental. It's a very large report. In that each and every environmental impact will be discussed. So the remedial measures also, what they have taken, what they will do, everything is discussed in this stage. Environmental statement contains a detailed plan for managing and monitoring environmental impacts both during and after the implementation. So that is very important. Environmental statement contains a detailed plan for managing and monitoring environmental impacts both during and after implementation. This should be clear and concise because non-specialists are likely to read the document. Technical language should be avoided. Any necessary technical information should be provided in appendices. So see, this environmental statement is issued to the everybody whoever is required. Even it is available to the common people. See, I have already told during 2 stages only common people involvement will be there. One we have already discussed. So based on their concerns and all, they have the right whether it is clarified or not. So that is being available in the environmental statement. So they will go through all these things and all. Those who are interested, they will go through all these things and all. The whatever concern they have raised is not considered, that will be again clarified in the next stage. Okay, so this is made available to each and every pupil. So care should be there to not to include much technical languages and technical terms. If it is included, then it should be clearly mentioned in the appendices for the understanding of the common people. It communicates the results of the environmental impact assessment to the decision make and other stakeholders in the development processes. So next is a review stage. Okay, the next common people participation is in the review stage. So once they have read environmental statements and all, they have studied about this thing, there is another further discussion, that is what is known as a review process. Quality control is an important stage in any environmental impact assessment. A review of the quality of the environmental statement is a way of demonstrating that the environmental statement has met all the appropriate legal requirements. The environmental state contains sufficient information to allow a decision to be made. Then the environmental statement is consistent with current good practice. A review of the environmental statement can be undertaken at the draft stage or after finalization. The earlier the review takes place, the greater the influence it can have over the quality of the environmental statement. So based on all these initial process like impact analysis, mitigation and environmental statement, a discussion over this environmental statement is, that is what is known as a review. So the common people at this stage, the common people will came to know that whether their concern is addressed during the in-between stages, and any remedial measures are being taken or not. They will once they are satisfied, then only the company can proceed with the project. That is what is being carried out in the review process. So it is the participation in this stage is the second massive participation of the common people. So it is very important. So next stage is decision making. Once review is completed, the complete report will be sent to the authorities. Once the environmental statement to be made available to all, this is the point in the process where the development is either granted planning permission or not. So in this stage, we will decide whether to give the permission or not. The concerned authority will be granting that permission. There is no involvement of the common people. The involvement of the common people is only up to the review stage. When making a decision on the application, decision makers when making a decision on the application, decision makers are required to consider all the relevant documental information, including the environmental statement and the opinions of the statutory consultees, the public and other stakeholders. So everything is being done in the review stage. So every point discussed in the review review process is to be considered for the decision making. The decision maker will also consider social and economic information, current planning policies, and the relevant local development framework bar local plan. The final decision will be based upon all these things. So once the review is completed, based on the report of the review committee, the decision is being taken. So everything is discussed in the review. So it will be based on that report. The higher authorities will take a decision whether to give the permission or not. So now comes the next stage, that is follow-up, a common tool for ensuring that the measures proposed are implemented in a management plan. So follow-up is just to ensure that lot of modifications are proposed during the all earlier stages. So whether it is followed or not, we will make sure during this stage, follow-up stage only, we will be make sure that it is the ensuring that the measures proposed are implemented in a management plan. It is the stage where the mitigation measures proposed within the environmental statement are actually implemented. So in this stage, now companies has to follow up, they will have to make sure that all the improvement proposals are being implemented or incorporated in the plan and all. It is also the stage where any necessary monitoring of the impact is undertaken. The purpose of monitoring is to compare predicted and actual impacts, particularly if the impact are either very important or the scale of the impact cannot be very accurately predicted. Environmental audit must be conducted periodically to ensure the right implementation of the environmental impact assessment findings. So the main tool used is environmental audit. So frequent checking will be there whether the company is implementing all these things and all. The authorities will make sure that all the proposed changes are implemented by the company, whether the company is implementing all the proposed changes or not. So by giving permission, they will be giving something like this. ഇതൊക്കെ ചെയ്താൽ മാത്രമാണ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇതൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് പെർമിഷൻ തരാം. ദാറ്റ് വിൽ ബി ദ സ്റ്റേറ്റ്മെൻറ്റ് ഇൻ ദ ഏർലി സ്റ്റേജ്, ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ഡിസിഷൻ മേക്കിംഗ്, ഡ്യൂറിങ് ഡിസിഷൻ മേക്കിംഗ്. സോ വാട്ട് എവർ improvement strategies they have proposed is to be made sure that it is implemented by the companies before the project is introduced. So that is what is follow up. So environmental audit are continuously doing during this stage to make sure that it is being done. Some officials will be going and checking whether it is implemented or not. That is what is known as audit. Now the next process, validity of environmental clearance. With the follow up, the process environmental impact assessment process is over. So if I have already told, during decision making, the main thing is whether to give permission or not. That was the decision to be made. So if the permission is granted, then only follow up process is having importance. If permission is not granted, then the project cannot be implemented, and if any they can resubmit starting from the initial stages itself by making their own modifications and all. If it is possible, they can reappear for the environmental impact assessment process with the with the major changes in the plans and all. So if once the permission is granted, then only we will move on to this stage, that is follow up. So now this is actually it was mistake. This is not the process involved in the environmental impact assessment. So now discussing about, so once if think that if the permission is granted, then comes the validity of environmental clearance. So we will have an idea how much. So it is not lifelong granted permission. So always the environmental impact assessment, that clearance certificate will have a validity 10 years in the case of river valley projects and 30 years for the mining projects, 5 years in the case of all other projects and activities. So these are the commonly, in as far as India is concerned, these are the years for which the permission is clearance is granted. So once this year is over, they have to appear for the environmental impact assessment. Area development projects and townships, the validity period shall be limited only to such activities as may be the responsibility of the applicant as developer. Okay. Now post environmental clearance monitoring. So once the clearance is obtained, so what is to be done in post environmental clearance monitoring? Mandatory for the project management to submit half yearly compliance reports in the respect of the stipulated prior environmental clearance terms. So once the permission is granted, it is I have already told, if it is for 10 years, they cannot sit for the entire 10 years quiet. So every half year they have to give the project management to submit half yearly compliance reports to the authority. So that is what is about post environmental clearance monitoring. So even after providing the clearance also, complete monitoring will be there. Every quarter year they will have the company will have to give the report to the authority. So now discussing about role of environmental impact assessment in sustainable development. Sustainable development is essential for the overall socio-economic development. To ensure sustainable development, the depletion of the renewable resources should not take place at a rate faster than the rate of generation. Only those technological developments with minimum environmental hazard should be adopted in order to sustain the environment for future generation. Sustainable development is closely linked to the carrying capacity of the ecosystem, as the latter determines the limit to the economic development. Carrying capacity of the specific ecosystem is the maximum rate of resource consumption that can be sustained definitely in that specific area, and over exploitation of the natural resources above this maximum will lead to the depletion of the ecological degradation. Okay. Now coming to the advantages of environmental impact assessment. EIA facilitates informed decision making by providing clear, well structured, dispassionate analysis of the effect and consequences of proposed projects. It aims to prevent environmental degradation by giving decision makers better information about the consequences that industrial projects could have on the environment. Since environmental effects and mitigations are considered early in the project planning cycle, protection of the environment can be a part of the project plan. Also, it predicts the way to use the natural resources like water in the optimal way. Lessens the conflicts between the industry project and the local community by sharing information about the environmental impact and involving them in the decision making. See, the common people involvement is ensured in the initial stage itself. So finally, once the project is implemented, there is a less chance for the conflict between common people and the authorities. Now coming to the limitations of environmental impact assessment, there is a lack of exhaustive ecological and socio-economic indicators for impact assessments. That is, see, the impact assessment decisions are based on the authorities. So we actually right now we lack the exhaustive ecological and socio-economic indicators. So on the basis how they are measuring, the permission is granted. So that indicators are very important. We lack right now we lack the exhaustive ecological and socio-economic indicators for the impact assessment. Public comments are not taken into account at the early stages, which often leads to conflict at the later stage of the project clearance. So in the initial stage itself, the public concern is not considered. So finally, there can be a possibility of conflict once the project clearance is given. There is always a lack of reliable data sources. The data collectors do not pay respect to the indigenous knowledge of the local people, and the credibility of the primary data collected by the data collectors is doubtful. So everything is based on this one. So reports and all. So if needed, authorities can make the modifications and all. So final decision is by the authorities. So that can be a problem for the common. Even the common people may think that there is a drastic problem, and of course there can be a possibility of drastic problems also. But if authorities thinks that this is not a major issue, then what we can do? So that is the limitation of environmental impact assessment. So that is all about environmental impact assessment. Actually, it is a very deep area to be studied. So within this limited hours, we cannot completely cover the environmental impact assessment procedures and all. If possible, I will arrange a presentation or technical talk or a expert talk on this area who is working in the Ministry of Environment. So by attending that presentation, you can have a clear idea about environmental impact assessment process and all. Okay, so if possible, you go through the net and all, search for some environmental impact assessment proposal submitted by any companies and all. Then if you go through that reports and all, then you will have a clear idea about environmental impact assessment processes. Thank you.